Hello, and welcome to Addicted to Murder.
Video spotlight time with your hosts Trisha and Courtney.
Yes, we are excited to be again trying out this new format and sharing some more information with you.
Yeah, so we just covered Robert Hansen, aka the Butcher Baker. And the thing that we wanted to emphasize on this one was his social anxiety.
Right, which if you remember back in part 1, we talked about him being very shy and feeling very uncomfortable around kind of the other kids at school when he was, younger and up through high school and kind of during that time.
Mm-hmm. And part of it was because he had a stutter. He was, well, in his words, not attractive. He had a lot of pimples. And I think also maybe because the way his dad treated him, he just sort of was,
Just lacking confidence.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So Courtney, you have suffered with social anxiety.
Yes.
Can you tell us, when you remember it starting?
I think really for me, it kind of started with a very specific memory on the first day of 5th grade.
Okay, so you're probably 10?
Yeah, so
Okay.
I was 10.
Okay.
And I was just starting at a brand new school, new town. We had moved over the summer. And I got on the school bus for the first day of school, and the first thing that I heard anybody say was, "Who the hell is she?"
Okay, I'm sorry, my dog is hacking. Okay, thanks, Mulder. Okay, sorry about that. Okay, so who the hell is she?
Mm-hmm.
Which makes you automatically like, are they talking about me?
Well, I knew they were talking about me because I was the only one getting on the bus at that bus stop.
Let me ask, was it a dick boy?
No, but it was kind of a girl who ended up being...
A dick.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And so I think that was the first time in my life that I really remember doubting whether I was good enough to have friends or be around these people.
So prior to that, you didn't seem to have this kind of issue?
Not in the same way. I think I've always been kind of shy and quiet, but it wasn't that fear of what other people are thinking.
Okay. So is it common for something like that to trigger social anxiety?
Yes. Oftentimes, that social anxiety is all about that fear that you are going to be judged negatively or rejected, whether that's by saying or doing the wrong thing, by looking the wrong way, by making a mistake, for whatever reason. And so having we'll call it a traumatic experience like that where you do feel judged or, you do make a mistake in front of everybody or something, that can be a triggering point for social anxiety.
And do you think people that actually go on to develop social anxiety, they're pre-programmed in a way, like you said that you were also kind of, shy and whatnot. Do you think that's partly something that needs to be done? Because I think we've all probably been made fun of or something like that's happened to us, but we don't all get social anxiety. So are there any mitigating factors that you think contribute to that? Or do you think it's just totally random on if you were become someone with that or not?
Yeah. I think that if you're more prone to anxiety, I also struggled with anxiety in general from a really young age, early elementary school. And so it was sort of I was already primed by being anxious about other things. So this was just one more thing to be anxious about.
So when you are socially anxious, what do you do in those situations? What are your defense mechanisms, or what would you just avoid those situations altogether and stay out of social situations, or how do you cope with having social anxiety?
Well, when I was really in the throes of it, it was very much avoidance. I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. I'm not gonna go to this thing. I'm not going to volunteer to, lead this group project. It was very much avoidance. And I think that's how a lot of people sort of handle it, especially in the beginning, if they don't get treatment for it. But over the years, I've done my own therapy. I am a therapist, so I'm constantly reminding myself of all the things that I am supposed to be doing to counter kind of that sort of anxiety. And so now I feel like I'm in a pretty good place with it. Like, yes, the thoughts still come up when I'm, say, going to meet people I don't know, or I am, having to speak in front of a group that is mostly strangers. Things like that. The thoughts come up of like, well, like, what if they don't like me? What if I do something stupid? Those kinds of things. But at this point, I'm able to just sort of tell those thoughts to shut up and go away, and that I am valuable as a person, and I don't need other people to validate my existence.
Which is very tough for everyone to admit. I mean, I have problems with that. I want validation all the time.
Right, absolutely.
It's like, I need it. But I don't always get it.
Exactly. Yeah, and for a long time, I missed out on doing a lot of things that I wanted to do because of my anxiety. Like, I was too anxious to, like, go to, like, a yoga class by myself.
Oh, wow. That's a calming class.
I was too anxious to eat at a restaurant by myself. Making phone calls is the worst. I still hate making phone calls.
I hate the phone. Sorry, my eyes twitching. Sorry, go ahead.
And so, or going to like a work gathering or something where maybe I didn't know more than one person, like I just wouldn't go. And so over time, I realized that I wanted to live my life. And I was really tired of letting my anxiety get in the way.
Social anxiety sounds like the first step to agoraphobia.
It can be. Agoraphobia is not necessarily linked to like the fear of being judged by others. It can also be like the fear that like something bad's going to happen.
Okay.
Like more generalized anxiety.
Okay.
But like, yes, there definitely can be that connection of people who get so anxious about being around other people and being judged that they just don't leave their house.
Now, you and I had talked about social anxiety before, and I had told you how I have been in social situations where I come off standoffish. I have been told I have resting bitch face. I do a lot of this. And you said that wasn't necessarily social anxiety. That might be a defense mechanism for trauma. So can you elaborate a little bit on how it differs? Because I thought maybe I did have social anxiety because I didn't feel anxious, but I felt removed, I guess.
Right. So I think one of the differences is kind of where the motivation to be sort of closed off is. And so if it's a matter of like, I'm trying to even think of what the motivation would be sort of in your case.
So when I am in a situation where I'm not feeling completely comfortable, I am just trying to keep people away. So I think I'm just trying to look like a snatch. Or like give off the don't mess with me vibe because I'm not quite trusting of the environment. But I'm not necessarily like anxious or afraid that I'm going to be made fun of or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. So that's where that motivation is different. Like in that moment, you're like, you want people to leave you alone. A socially anxious person is afraid that people will leave them alone and won't like them.
So it's totally different.
It's sort of like the opposite. It might look the same in terms of like behavior of avoiding. Yeah, but with that social anxiety, when it can be bad, it really is this fear that any tiny imperfection is a reason for people to reject you.
Okay. I want to give a shout out to Courtney because she went to Vegas the weekend before last with me and a whole bunch of people she didn't know. She came, I don't know if she was just pushing herself or she wanted to see Vegas or because it was my birthday or maybe a little bit of everything. But when she was like, I bought my plane ticket, I was like, shit. So that was really awesome of you to step out of your comfort zone. And I know like, there were times where you were like, I need to go be by myself a little bit, but you did, I thought, a great job. I don't think anyone that didn't know you had a clue that you were anxious there.
Thanks. Yeah. And really, I think all of the above are the reasons why I kind of went on that trip. And surprisingly, it wasn't so much the anxiety that was bothering me when I would go take my space. It was just more that I'm an introvert and my social energy was just drained.
You know, I totally feel you because when I came home from that trip, I think I was shut up in my room for 2 days because there's only, you know, I can't figure out if I'm an introvert or extrovert because I enjoy doing things with people, but I definitely sometimes just disappear and like
Maybe you're an ambivert.
Is that a thing? Is that like ambidextrous but for verts?
Yep.
Ambivert.
Learn new things all the time.
There's so many words and they've probably all got Latin or Greek roots and anyways, so what would you suggest to people that have social anxiety to help themselves?
I mean, number one, if you have not gone to therapy, go to therapy. I think therapy is helpful for everybody. But if that's something that you're not in a place to be able to do, I think reminding yourself that everybody else is too busy worrying about what they're doing to worry so much about you and what you're doing.
Well, and it's kind of funny as we get older, I think that we start to realize like we don't totally care what everybody else thinks.
Right.
So,
and not, I mean, the fact is not everyone's going to like you.
Yeah.
And you're not going to like everyone. And that's okay. And you are valuable as a human being no matter what kind of mistakes you make, no matter what other people think of you. You're valuable as a human being.
Do you find that mindfulness helps?
Mindfulness can help. Especially like just sort of being aware of those thoughts that are coming up, or being aware of when the signs of anxiety start coming up. You know, that racing heart, that's the one that I noticed
Sweaty.
first. Yeah, getting sweaty, getting kind of dizzy, for me anyway.
It's like a panic attack kind of. A little
Sort
one.
of. Yeah, it's never gotten that bad for me, but some people with social anxiety do have panic attacks. I know for me, a lot when I was a kid, it was more like I just had stomach aches all the time and didn't really know why. And now I know that it was anxiety, but I didn't know at the time.
My mother-in-law talked about when she had social anxiety when she was a child. She was, you know, kind of a little bit bigger, and she was afraid to be made fun of. So I don't know if she was at one point made fun of. I'm assuming probably. And when they would call her up to the chalkboard, she would just burst out in tears because she was afraid to walk up and do the problem because she was so afraid of being made fun of again. And it just breaks my heart. It's so sad. And it sounds like, you know, these really start to manifest preteen years. And honestly, that's when I think kids are the meanest, you know.
Absolutely.
End of elementary school. Middle school kids are
They're the worst.
mean. I mean, they so are. And we work in a middle school, and so we're
around it all the
we
time.
see it a lot. I mean, and unfortunately, I feel like that's just kind of when all this stuff starts to really start happening, and it's really sad.
Right. Yeah, and I do want to point out, you know, there is something really normal in your sort of preteen, teenage years about caring a lot about what other people think and, you know, wanting to fit in and wanting to be like, that's really normal. Where it goes from kind of just like normal self-consciousness to social anxiety is when that fear gets in the way of being able to do the things that you want or need to do.
It becomes debilitating, and it starts ruining your quality of life,
Right.
so to speak. Okay. Well, is there anything else you want to say about social anxiety?
Just that it can be really hard, but it is something that can get better.
So what we've learned is typically there's a triggering event, something that happened most likely in your youth that made you overly self-conscious and don't want to repeat that event. So you're going to like strike down any instance or circumstance where you might have that event happen again. So you start not going to functions or doing stuff like that because you're so afraid. You're avoiding this reaction, and so your behavior is changing.
Right.
And what we can do to cope with that is therapy can help, where you will learn to validate your own self. Maybe not rely so much on everybody else, validating you.
Yep. Learning to talk back to those automatic worry thoughts that pop into your head.
Those intrusive thoughts. The worst.
Right.
They're rarely right.
Almost never.
Yeah.
I mean, just an example. This is not me, but it is someone I've worked with who at one point got so wrapped up in whether like they were holding their hands in a weird position that like it's all they could think about for an entire class period was how am I supposed to hold my hands that doesn't look weird so people don't judge me.
So they stop paying attention to things that they need to learn because they're so fixated on something as little as, but to them it's a huge deal.
Right, to them that social anxiety is saying like if you hold your hands wrong, people won't like you, they'll think you're weird.
You know what the most annoying thing is for any sort of mental illness, disorder, anxiety disorder, whatever, is when people say, just tough it up, because if it was that easy, then we all would. But every little trauma is very big to the person having it. So something that happened to you, I might be like, that's no big deal. But to you, it could be a huge deal. And it's really frustrating when people just don't give you any sort of like the credence that's needed to validate that.
Right, absolutely. And I think also like people who give that advice of just like, man up or whatever, it's harmful advice because trying to just push through, trying to pretend that those feelings don't exist, all that does is make it harder in the long run to cope with them.
Well, and then you're also afraid to express yourself.
Exactly.
And that's going to make it even harder to get the help you need. So I don't remember if we talked about mindfulness in our last video, but what I do for mindfulness exercise is when I have intrusive thoughts, not necessarily social anxiety thoughts, but I have all sorts of other intrusive thoughts. I take my place, or I go in my mind and I go to my favorite place, which is a creek, and I have my dog with me, and I just try to smell the smells and hear the leaves and see what needs to be seen, and that sort of will take me out of that moment and that fear and calm me down. Do you do a coping mechanism like that, or do you have something else, or do you just tell yourself, Courtney, this is a social anxiety thought, it's not real, let's get rid of it?
It depends on sort of how intense it is. So I don't necessarily use like a visualization, although that's a really great coping tool to use. My go-to is I usually will try and practice some progressive muscle relaxation because I can do a pretty good job in my brain of like just telling the thought to go away, but sometimes it's that physical anxiety that takes longer to get rid of. And so progressive muscle relaxation, for those of you who don't know, it's amazing. I highly recommend it. It's basically you start at your feet and you work muscle group by muscle group up your body all the way to your head, tensing and then releasing the muscles one group at a time. And so that for me, one, it gives your brain something to focus on while you're doing it. If you're doing it right, it should take about 8 to 10 minutes.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So you should take your time with it. So it gives your brain a distraction, and then it also gets rid of all of the anxiety, like those physical anxiety symptoms. It relaxes your muscles, it slows down your breathing, it slows down your heart rate. It releases tension in places that you didn't even know you were having it. Like I guarantee probably most of us are holding way more tension in our jaw than we ever think we are.
I know I am. I have already broken one mouth guard.
So.
In a month.
Oh, man.
I know. The dentist is like, we might have to try titanium.
Super teeth.
So no. Well, thank you so much, Courtney, for sharing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And please feel free to comment with any questions. The therapist will respond.
Yes. And this one I can speak both from the professional side and the experiential side.
And you know what? I mean, social anxiety might not seem like, that high on the list of whatevers, but if it's in your life, then it can be like taking over your life if you can't figure out how to, manage it. So it can be very serious. Can totally, take a lot of pleasure away from you, which otherwise should be had.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, thank you.
Yeah. And thank you.
And BTW, my self-consciousness right now is like, it looks like I have a crazy sweaty face, but really it's just shimmer. So note to self, don't wear shimmer on YouTube videos going forward.
Or wear shimmer if you like shimmer.
True that. I don't need your validation.
Exactly.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.